From the studios of Staten Island Community Television, you're watching In the Bleachers, the TV show for the world's most passionate sports fans. Hello, everyone. I'm Jaime Hixson. Usually you see me here with my dear friend Eric Rosen. Eric couldn't make it tonight because he's actually attending the opener of the Staten Island Yankees for the season right now. Staten Island is hosting Brooklyn at Richmond County Bank Ballpark, and he's at the game right now, also as part of autism awareness. So if you're over at the game a little bit later on, maybe you could drop by to Eric's table and say hello. So in the meantime, I'm going to be going solo for tonight, so we're very happy that you could join us. And as always, you can contact us through Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, where we also have a whole bunch of our episodes uploaded online. And you can also contact us through Snapchat and Instagram. Now, where to begin? Lately, a lot of the talk has been about the aftermath of the NBA Finals, specifically the Twitter war that's been going on between Draymond Green and LeBron James. Ironically, those two appeared in, I guess it was an up-close and personal thing called the Barbershop, where they actually talked about a whole bunch of different things, and there were barbers there doing haircuts. And as it turns out, LeBron was talking about why he decided to make the move back to Cleveland, and he went into detail with his reasons about why he returned. But ever since the finals ended, even during the finals, there was a lot of heat going on between the Cavaliers and Warriors. As it turns out, the Warriors wound up winning that series in 5 games, as the majority of the critics wound up thinking. At the same time, a lot has been placed on Kevin Durant and whether he really decided to make the move to Oakland simply because he wanted to win a championship or because of other reasons. Obviously, chasing a championship is every person's goal. In fact, one of his former teammates on Thunder, Enes Kanter, wound up criticizing him in an interview for ESPN, saying that all he did was go to Oakland so he could chase a championship. Isn't the idea of every professional athlete, or even amateur athlete for that matter, to chase a championship? I mean, look at what's going on in the NCAA. You have a lot of these one-and-done guys, but at the same time, a lot of the one-and-done guys wind up playing for national powers like Kentucky and North Carolina and Duke and so many others. They chase a championship for a reason, because they want to get their name etched in stone with some of the greatest players of years past, and they also want to be up there with their universities as part of history. I mean, keep in mind, Kentucky's won 7 national titles. UCLA, of course, is the all-time leader with 11 national titles. And long before the days of the one-and-done era, they won national titles with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton and so many other great players that wound up passing through. Jamal Wilkes also, Walt Hazzard, and so many different others. And of course, Kentucky built their reputation first with the legendary Adolph Rupp, and then with so many great players that wound up passing through. So when you think about it, every athlete that makes their way into the pros, whether it's the NBA or the other sports, they're out to chase a championship. It just so happens that Durant wound up seeing a better opportunity in Oakland. And when you think about it, can you really blame him? Look who he had on Oklahoma City. In addition to Russell Westbrook, who's still a terrific player, but has developed a reputation for also being a very, very selfish player. A guy who winds up disrupting team chemistry and the locker room because He's always demanding the ball. At the same time, those two at one time had James Harden, another terrific player who wound up getting traded away to Houston, and good role players like Reggie Jackson, who wound up being traded over to Detroit. We also mentioned Cantor. And there was also Kendrick Perkins, a great defensive center who wound up getting traded to Oklahoma City by Boston for the finals run in 2012, I think it was. And as it turns out, Perkins wound up getting traded away as well. So when you think about it, you see what Oklahoma City had done in the past, trading Harden to Houston, trading Perkins to Cleveland, as it turns out, trading Reggie Jackson to Detroit. They didn't really have that many other pieces that they can try and build a championship team with. I mean, granted, last year they came really close to beating Oklahoma City before Thunder wound up blowing that lead to the Warriors and losing it in 7 games. But when you think about it, should you really blame Kevin Durant for leaving to chase that championship in Oakland? Or should you be better off blaming Oklahoma City management for making, in hindsight, what's been a couple of rather questionable moves? And from what I understand, James Harden wound up getting traded away over a measly $5 million. Not $5 million per season, $5 million over the length of what was left on his contract when he first signed it with Oklahoma City. But now, Harden has become such a terrific player with the Houston Rockets. He's already led them to a Western Conference final. And this year, with all of the changes that they made, the Rockets wound up still having a pretty solid season. They won over 50 games, and they made it to the Western Conference semifinals. But when you look at what happened in this finals matchup between between the Warriors and the Cavaliers, all of the signs pointed to the Warriors winning their second title in the last 3 years. Think about it. A Warriors team with 2 really good superstars, 2 established superstars, I should say, and a budding superstar in Klay Thompson, and another budding superstar, Draymond Green, and also a really good crop of role players that they wound up assembling themselves with. We mentioned some of the guys that Oklahoma City wound up trading away, but what about what the Warriors have been able to build with in the last 5 years? If you want to see the model for how to build a really strong championship contender, look at what Golden State has done. They've drafted Curry. They've drafted Thompson, both number 1 picks. They drafted Green, a second-round pick who I don't want to say was overlooked, but was really underrated as a player, and he's become one of the best all-around players in the league right now. And then there's setting themselves up with really, really good role players. They wound up getting Sean Livingston, who's become a real godsend for them as a backup point guard. There was also the rookie that they drafted out of UNLV last summer, who played a really good role in a couple of the games during this series. And when you look at what Cleveland had, when you think about it, the 3 series that they've played against each other in a row always had that one X factor that wound up deciding how the series was going to play out. For example, 2015, the Warriors wound up winning the championship in 6 games only because Kevin Love and the point guard, Kyrie Irving, wound up getting hurt. And LeBron, quite frankly, did all he could in that series, but the Warriors were just too strong. Now, last year, the Cavaliers wound up winning the championship for 2 reasons. 1, because Draymond Green acted like an idiot and got himself suspended for one of the games. And 2, because LeBron carried that team all the way to a title. This year, when you think about it, the Warriors The Warriors played 17 playoff games this year. They swept their way through the Western Conference playoffs and wound up winning that championship in 5 games over the Cavaliers. Out of the 17 games that they've played, only 4 were decided by single digits. That's a testament to how supreme and how superior the Warriors were on each side of the ball. And when you think about it, look at some of the role players that the Warriors wound up bringing in to support Curry and Durant and Green and Klay Thompson. Making the trade for Andre Iguodala, which was one of the most brilliant moves that their management could make. There was also, we mentioned before, Sean Livingston. Getting, of all people, Matt Barnes, who, in spite of the fact that he's a complete idiot because of his off-the-field troubles, was still able to play a key role for them down the stretch of the regular season. And we mentioned the rookie from UNLV, Patrick McCaw, who wound up playing some really, really important minutes for them and got some really big baskets in this series. They also signed David West on the cheap. David West has proven himself to be a brilliant role player, a big, powerful guy who can throw his weight around and add some toughness on that front line. They also made the trade for Zaza Pachulia, who, even though he did not really provide the type of defense that the Warriors were looking for in the middle, was still able to play a key reserve role. And even JaVale McGee, a guy who was built a reputation for being a bit of a nut, both on and off the court, he was still able to play so many important minutes and get so many big baskets for them, both in the regular season and in the playoffs. Now comes the matter of what the Warriors are going to do, because they've got quite a few free agents coming up. Klay Thompson's going to be a free agent. I think Steph Curry's going to be a free agent. But you can bet that the Warriors are going to do all they can to try and bring their core group back together. But there is one thing that the Warriors have going against them. A few years ago, the Warriors hired Jerry West, the Hall of Famer who built all those great championship teams on the Lakers, and even made the Memphis Grizzlies a contender for a while, as a consultant. They hired him as a consultant, and as it turns out, it was his brilliant expertise that wound up paving the way for the Warriors to build their title teams of the last 2 out of 3 years. Well, now Jerry West is going to resign so he can take a similar job with the Los Angeles Clippers. So when you think about it, it's no coincidence that wherever Jerry West has gone, he's turned teams into a contender. Does that sound familiar, New York Knicks? While Jerry West has built his Hall of Fame reputation, not only on the court where he starred for 13 years, but in the front office where he's built more championship contenders, once again, the Knicks continue to shoot themselves in the foot with one incompetent move after another. Now, as far as what the Clippers and Jerry West can try to do to make themselves a real championship contender, what's going to happen next? Are they going to re-sign Chris Paul? Because from what I understand, Chris Paul has been rumored to be talking to the San Antonio Spurs and the Houston Rockets, among some of the teams that he's been rumored to be going to, or maybe even showing some interest in playing for. Is Jerry West going to come up with an idea of a championship team his own way, or does he still think that the Clippers can try and make a push for that ever-elusive title with Paul and Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan and some of the other role players that they have? Only time will tell. Now, whereas the Warriors won 2 out of their 3 championships with superstars, the Cavaliers have made it to the finals 3 years in a row because LeBron James has been by far the best player in the sport right now. But when you think about it, How could the Cavaliers even get to this position? Because for one, look at the guys that LeBron has been working with. When he won his 2 titles with the Heat, he had Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade. And that was a super team, even in spite of what LeBron told the media after Game 5 when the Warriors won the title. He won it with a super team. And the only reason why he won the championship last year is because he single-handedly willed that team into the championship. And it also helped that Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving were healthy this time and were able to provide some really big minutes for them last year. This year, Kyrie Irving and LeBron James busted their butts to try and get the Cavaliers in position to make the series interesting. But what happened? 4 out of the 5 games in this series were complete mismatches. For one, Kevin Love was horrendous. He only averaged about 16 points a game. And look at some of the role players that the Cavaliers had that were getting some of the minutes, or barely getting any minutes when you think about it. Richard Jefferson, the ex-Net, did nothing. Channing Frye, an ex-Knick, also did nothing. J.R. Smith did nothing for 3 games in that series, and that's pretty much your reasons why they wound up getting their heads handed to them in this series. And Kyle Korver, who was a big trade acquisition for the Cavaliers from Atlanta, did 0 for this entire series. So, and also Darren Williams, the ex-Net, did not do one single thing. Darren Williams, Kyle Korver, Kevin Love, Channing Frye, Richard Jefferson, J.R. Smith, all guys who did nothing to help their teams win this series. That's the reason why the Cavaliers lost this series. So, what can the Cavaliers do to try and win that title back next year? There have already been rumors of a Kevin Love to Carmelo Anthony trade. Let me put it this way. Whatever help LeBron can get, more power to him. Because for one, he wants to be able to make Cleveland more of a contender than they already have been in the last 3 years. There's also been rumors of a Kevin Love for Paul George trade. If I'm the Cavaliers, I do all I can to try and get Paul George in a Cavalier uniform. Because if anything, Paul George is probably a better all-around player than Carmelo Anthony will ever be. Carmelo Anthony is a locker room and chemistry cancer. That's one thing. Another, he cannot play any defense to save his life. At least Paul George can try to play some semblance of defense every now and then. But seeing as how the Cavaliers and the Pacers are Central Division rivals, don't expect any trade talks to be happening anytime soon. Now, if there were to be a Kevin Love trade rumor, in all likelihood, it would probably be with the Knicks for Carmelo Anthony. The only thing is, would each team even try and get to the bargaining table to try and talk about a deal? Only time will tell on this one. Now, as far as the aftermath of the finals, there's been some real Twitter bantering going about between LeBron and Draymond Green. LeBron, of course, saw that T-shirt that Draymond Green had on, which said Quickie, which was poking fun at the Cavaliers' home arena, Quicken Loans Arena. And then LeBron tweeted out, "That's what she said." So you can draw your own conclusions from there. And then, naturally, Mr. Green was going to respond with a little joke of his own. So, you know what? If anything, it's all gotten to be a little bit childish right now. So with the draft taking place within the next week to 10 days, it's going to be really interesting seeing what these teams can do to try and build for their futures. When you think about it, every team that's got a draft pick, first or second, they're trying to build some kind of future for themselves. Of course, the Celtics have the first overall pick in the draft, while the Lakers are picking second. And the only reason why the Celtics have the first overall pick in the draft, even though they made the Eastern Conference Finals this year, was because they took advantage of the Nets' incompetence and historical ineptitude when it comes to wheeling and dealing. At least the Nets have themselves a number one draft pick. I think they're picking in the late teens or early 20s in this year's draft. For the record, the Knicks are going to be picking 8th. Now, as far as what's going to happen in the draft, the Celtics are going to be picking first. All signs point to the Celtics probably taking the kid from the University of Washington, Markelle Fultz, and the Lakers probably taking Lonzo Ball of UCLA. That's if the Lakers have not been turned off enough by the big mouth and the downright narcissism of his dad, LeVar Ball, which is, I'm telling you, if you watch him in interviews, you would probably want to punch a hole on your TV screen because he's that arrogant. And he's also proven that he has no respect for women either, because during an interview with Colin Cowherd on Fox Sports 1, he pretty much said that he's not out to try and market the new sneaker that Lonzo Ball has out for women, that he's only looking out for his own brand. It's gotten to a point where enough is enough with this guy. And Lonzo, one of these days, has to grow up and realize that this guy is just not getting any favors done by this idiot father of his. Now, as far as what else is going to happen in the draft, let's see what's going to be going on with the draft. We mentioned that the Celtics are going to be picking first and the Lakers are going to be picking second. For the record, the top 10 picks are going to be the Celtics and the Lakers, followed by, we still got to wait for this thing to load. Here we are. The 76ers are going to be picking third. And then it's going to be Phoenix picking fourth, and then Sacramento fifth, followed by Orlando, Minnesota, the Knicks, Mavericks, and Kings. For the record, the Brooklyn Nets are going to be picking 22nd. Now, exactly what should the Knicks do? I have an idea of what they should be able to do, but what they should do and what they want to do are two different things, because they never listen to their fan base anyway. But then again, what professional franchise has ever considered their fan base when it comes to personnel decisions? As far as what the Knicks should do, they've been needing a point guard for the longest time, probably since Mark Jackson got traded away the first time. Now, there are a couple of guys that are out there. One, there was a lot of talk about this teenage point guard from France named Frank Ntilikina, who's an intriguing prospect. He's 6'5", and he has a wingspan of about 7 feet, which is really good for him as a rim protector. And he's also going to be able to take advantage of point guard mismatches because he'll be able to tower over any smaller point guards that he goes up against. At the same time, though, Frank Ntilikina played a grand total of 60 games of professional ball in Europe, and he's also spent a little bit of time playing for the French national team, and he's only averaged about barely 10 to 15 minutes a game. Should the Knicks really trust their gut in a 19-year-old kid who's only played 60 professional games in Europe and has only averaged about 10 to 15 minutes a game? I'm not sure that's necessarily the way to go. His upside is good. It's really good. But that game experience, You have to have somebody who knows what they're doing in order to be able to lead a team from the one. There's also been some talk about the kid from North Carolina State, Dennis Smith, a guy who's not as gifted height-wise as Tilakina. Smith is about 6'3", but man, he's got some hops on him. The only issue with him is he's coming off a major knee injury, which he suffered in high school, which wound up dropping his stock a little bit when he wound up getting recruited by colleges. He was able to play a full season for NC State, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was the ACC's Rookie of the Year, and he wound up posting some pretty good numbers for the Wolfpack. So let's see what happens there. There's also been some talk that maybe the Knicks are going to consider the other ACC player, in this case, Luke Kennard, who's a freshman out of Duke. Luke Kennard actually has a little bit of upside to him. For one, he's a Duke kid, which means he comes from some really, really good lines right there. As far as what he brings to the table, basketball-wise, let's see what. Here we are. We're looking through the Bleacher Report to see what kind of scouting report there could be in regards to the guy. Luke Kennard, by the way, averaged 19.5 points a game his freshman year at Duke. And from what I understand, he's been moving up pretty quickly on the draft board. And as it turns out, the Lakers, Pacers, Heat, and the Pistons have all shown some real interest in him. And as a matter of fact, one guy who's a general manager in the late first round said that there was no way that he was going to fall that far. From what I understand, this guy has really taken some teams' attention and put it in his direction. He's a really good perimeter shooter, and specifically from downtown, he can be really, really deadly. He shot 43.8% from three-point range last year, and he can play either guard spot. He's versatile enough where he can handle the ball by himself or even move without the ball and try and command attention. So let's see exactly what the Knicks do here. The bottom line is the Knicks have a lot of holes that they need to fill. They need to get a point guard. They need to get a real power forward, someone who can add some muscle and kick somebody in the butt if they need it. They need bench help in the worst way. They need a center who can command a double team. Now, as far as what's going to happen with the Brooklyn Nets, long story short, they need a team. I don't know how to say it, folks, but after winning, 20 games last year, the Brooklyn Nets became the single worst team in the NBA last year. And what did they get for their efforts? The 22nd pick in the draft. First and foremost for the Nets, they need a power forward. They need a point guard. What's going to happen with Brook Lopez? He's got 1 year left on his contract, and there's still no word as far as what's going to happen with him future-wise. Only time will tell to see if he's going to be able to find a new home or if he's going to be used as trade bait to maybe move up in the draft. That's something that the Nets should really explore. Use Brook Lopez as trade bait. See if you can get yourself a higher draft pick. Or if you're not happy with any of the prospects that are going to be falling their way, maybe trade down a little bit. See if they can get someone that they can build their future with. So let's see exactly what happens here. Now, as far as what's going on in Major League Baseball, unfortunately, the Yankees wound up having a really disappointing West Coast road trip in Anaheim and Oakland. And unfortunately, one of their best pitchers, CC Sabathia, wound up getting himself hurt. So it looks like he's going to be out for a little bit. And it's looking like it's looking more and more like maybe Aaron Judge is going to be solved sometime soon, because after launching one pitch after another out of the park and producing 21 home runs for the season, it's gotten to the point where pitchers are going to have to really start learning to pitch carefully against him, or maybe even challenge him a little bit more with some breaking stuff, because I don't see Aaron Judge responding to breaking stuff, especially falling in the dirt that well. As far as what else is going on with the Yankees, there's a strong possibility that they might be calling up one of their best prospects, if not the best prospect in their system right now, Gleyber Torres, who's their shortstop prospect. If he does make his way to the Bronx, whose spot is he going to take over? Because Didi Gregorius and Starlin Castro are already solidified up the middle. They're already the go-to double play combination for them. Could it be that maybe Torres takes over for Chase Headley at third base? Possibly, because right now Chase Headley has been slumping badly all season. And what's going to happen when Headley goes into his walk year next year? Do the Yankees trade him? Do they trade him, or do they at least go for another 3 months with Headley, or maybe bring him off the bench as a pinch hitter, or maybe even have him take some ground balls at first base every once in a while? So that's the other thing. Now, as far as what the Yankees did in the draft, just recently, the Major League Baseball draft wound up taking place, and it was broadcast live on MLB Network and MLB.com. Now, I'm going to see exactly what happens here. The Yankees, of course, have been really, really loading up on pitching. It seems like that is now the thing for them to do as far as how to build their future. We do know that the Yankees wound up getting a pitching prospect not too long ago. So hopefully they'll be able to build with their pitching staff down the road. As far as the Mets are concerned, just when you think things could not get any worse for that poor franchise, Matt Harvey, Neil Walker, Matt Harvey, Neil Walker, and now Juan Lagares all wound up getting hurt. Lagares is going to find himself back on the disabled list because he broke his thumb while trying to dive for a fly ball against Washington. Harvey's back on the disabled list. Walker is on the disabled list. Harvey, if I'm not mistaken, has another problem with his shoulder, while Walker wound up hurting his hamstring. It's gotten to the point where should the Mets still try and make a go of it for a playoff spot, or should they maybe become sellers at this point? Because after the disappointing effort that they had against the Washington Nationals, maybe it's time to try and call a spade and try and become sellers at this point. Granted, the Mets have made themselves real believers in being contenders this year, especially with all of the money that they've spent over the last couple of years. But at the same time, there's still some really good prospects down in the minor leagues that they might want to be able to give a look-see. For example, Ahmed Rosario, who's their number one shortstop prospect. Maybe Ahmed Rosario can give them a little shot in the arm, especially considering that, one, Asdrubal Cabrera has been losing major range at shortstop, and two, Jose Reyes cannot hit the side of a barn. I mean, when you have a guy who's in his walk year and he's hitting barely 120 for the season, it just makes teams want to have to cut their losses somewhere down the line. But knowing how the Mets are and knowing how invested they are in this season, they're not going to concede anything because they want to be able to ride this whole ship until the end of the regular season. So they're going to see if their horses can return from the disabled list so they can try and make a run at it down the road. Now, let's see exactly what's going on as far as the draft is concerned. We have MLB.com over here. Sorry about that, folks. We're still trying to look at what exactly happened. Here we are. These were all of the first-round selections that took place. For the record, the Yankees wound up picking 16th. And predictably, they selected a pitcher. His name is Clark Schmidt, and he's from the University of South Carolina. And from what I understand, Clark Schmidt is coming off Tommy John surgery, which means the Yankees are going to be taking their time with this young man. As for the Mets, they wound up picking, let's see here. They wound up picking 20th, and they too picked a hurler. It's David Peterson from the University of Oregon. So when you think about it, you can't go wrong with trying to build with pitching. For the record, the first overall pick of the draft was made by Minnesota, and they chose a shortstop named Royce Lewis from J. Seta Catholic High School in California. And already, the Braves wound up agreeing to contract terms with their number one draft pick, Kyle Wright, who's a pitcher from Vanderbilt. Kyle Wright is a guy who's got quite a bit of an upside. He's not necessarily a big, strong guy. He's only about 6'3", but he's still able to fool hitters with a lot of breaking stuff. So let's see if the Braves have another blue-chip pitcher on their hands. And when you think about it, the Braves have actually not been completely terrible this season. After the disastrous season that they had last year, the Braves have really grown by leaps and bounds this season. One, because of the prospects that they have, and two, because of the contributions of some of the couple of veteran players that they have. I mean, granted, they're 7 games under 500, but right now, Dansby Swanson, who used to be a first-round pick by Arizona before he wound up getting traded away, Dansby Swanson has emerged to be their best player right now. So let's see how much longer the Braves can try and ride this thing before they fall completely out of the race. As far as speaking of races, it's looking more and more like Washington has made the Eastern Division race a complete laughingstock because they've got a wide margin of a lead right now over everybody else, and it's looking more and more like the Nationals are going to be taking that Eastern Division, even with more than half the season left over. As far as the Central Division, Milwaukee still has a slim lead. Colorado, Arizona, and the Los Angeles Dodgers are neck and neck in the Western Division. Now, in the American League, the Yankees and Red Sox are basically neck and neck within each other of the Eastern Division lead, while Minnesota has a slim lead on the Central Division, and the Astros have turned the Western Division race into a complete and utter laughingstock. They already have a double-digit lead in the Western Division. As far as what's going on in football, there's been a lot of interesting things going on in the NFL. And a lot of the talk in this area has been about the Jets. Every fan is convinced that the Jets are mailing it in for this season. Of course, if you ask Matt Forte, he'll just say, bring it. But when you think about it, look at what the Jets have on offense. A very aging Josh McCown, Two kids who have become very, very, very unproven, Bryce Petty and Christian Hackenberg. And speaking of Christian Hackenberg, how do you think those mini camps are going for him? There's been more than two reports of Christian Hackenberg hitting reporters with passes during mini camps. If that doesn't throw a scare into every Jets fan, I don't know what will. Granted, it's only practice, but let's just say that at least Tom Brady doesn't unwillingly try to throw passes towards reporters. If he were to do that, he'd probably want to plunk them in the head on purpose because of all of the scandals that he's gotten himself into. That's number one. Number two, do the Jets really expect to win games this year with Quincy Enunwa as their number one receiver? It's gotten to the point where the Jets have become a who's who of what's going on with that roster. Right now, Matt Forte is basically the go-to guy offensively for them. They have no quarterback system. They have no set of receivers. The tight ends, where are the tight ends? And their offensive line continues to be a complete and utter mess. Right now, the only thing that they've got going for themselves is their defensive line. Muhammad Wilkerson, Sheldon Richardson, and Leonard Williams all might be able to do something for them down the road. Maybe they'll make a trade involving Muhammad Wilkerson. Maybe they'll make a trade involving Sheldon Richardson too, because right now it's looking more and more like Leonard Williams is going to be the guy that's going to be the everyday down lineman for them. And also, they surprised quite a few people when they released David Harris, their longtime star linebacker. I don't know if it was a cost-cutting measure or what it was, but a little surprised that they would want to release one of their best players this year. Now, as far as what they've got going for them in the secondary, at least they were able to help themselves in the secondary with their number one pick. Now, let's see exactly how the Jets play this, though. Because after all the moves they made, right now the Jets are down to 4 players who are over the age of 30. And, of course, reporters were asking the coach, Todd Bowles, why he still has Josh McCown on the roster, much less as their quarterback. And Bowles said, well, even in kindergarten, someone's got to be the teacher. Draw your own conclusions from this, but it's gotten to the point where I would not see the Jets winning any more than 2 games this year. Of course, they do have Bilal Powell also coming out of the backfield. So when you think about it, it's going to be Bilal Powell and Matt Forte as their two-headed monster at running back. That could be the only way the Jets can try and make things interesting this season. Keep it on the ground, especially with the mess of a quarterback trio that they have. Now, as far as what the Giants are doing, the Giants surprised a lot of people last year because not only did they make the playoffs, Eli Manning had an outstanding season, and so did Odell Beckham Jr. And now they've added to their receiving corps because now they have the ex-Jet Brandon Marshall as a very important backup. Plus, they got a little bit of insurance for Eli Manning, and that's when they signed the ex-Jet Geno Smith, although I'm not really sure if he's going to be much of an insurance policy for them. But at least the Giants have a little bit more of a future going for themselves than the Jets do. Because at least the Giants have some semblance of a passing game. Eli's going to be a Hall of Famer once he retires, and he's working with a really, really dangerous receiving trio in Beckham, Sterling Shepard, and now Brandon Marshall. And we'd have to give well wishes over to the ex-Giant Victor Cruz, who wound up getting himself a deal with the Chicago Bears. Victor was such a such an important player for the Giants and such a delightful man for the media to speak to. So hopefully Victor will be able to get his career back on track playing for Chicago this coming season. There's still some issues of concern for the Giants. Number one is the running back spot. Are the Giants going to make Paul Perkins their everyday running back, or are they going to look elsewhere? There's also the issue of the offensive line. The O-line has been a little bit shaky. At least the Giants were able to take care of their weakness at tight end, because now they drafted the kid from Mississippi, and it's looking more and more like they could make him a real target at tight end this coming season. There's still the issue of linebacker. So it's important for them to try and get younger at linebacker. That way they can try and improve on their pass rush a little bit. The line was really solid last season. Damon Harrison, the ex-Jet, had a terrific season for the Giants. Now let's see exactly what's going to happen with them this year. Will Jason Pierre-Paul be able to make some kind of contribution, especially when last year was the first time he was able to play with a mangled hand for the entire season? Let's see what the Giants do there. So we mentioned we mentioned the NBA, we mentioned Major League Baseball, and we mentioned football for a little bit. Now, as far as what's going on in hockey, the draft is going to be taking place real soon. And as far as what's going to go on with the hockey draft, the Devils will have the first overall pick. That's the really good news. One of our local teams has the chance to get the best prospect in the draft out there. For the record, the Jets are going to the Devils are going to be picking first, while the Rangers, I'm going to see if I can try and find out exactly what's going on with the draft. I'm going through the NHL app right now. There's also the issue of the expansion draft. The Las Vegas Golden Knights are going to be making their season debut in 2017-18. And the expansion draft is going to be taking place this coming Wednesday night. And for the record, the expansion draft takes place, well, the waiver wire and draft trade wire is going to end at 3 o'clock. And then the draft is going to be taking place this coming Wednesday. Speaking of hockey, we just found out that the Rangers wound up releasing Dan Girardi. In fact, they wound up buying out his contract. Sometimes I wonder exactly what the Rangers' motive is for a particular season. Is it to win a Stanley Cup, or is it to not win the Stanley Cup, yet build a team that is strong enough to get by in the playoffs? I really don't know what their intention is. I say that because Dan Girardi really disappointed the Rangers and their fans the last couple of seasons because of his poor production. Now, as far as what are they going to do, there's still quite a few prospects that they have in their system that they can try and build on. And there's a couple of free agents that maybe they should look over to see if they can get an extra scoring punch on their staff. There's also the issue of the power play. Once again, the power play killed them this past season, and they still don't have that go-to guy to put them ahead when they have the man advantage. So let's see exactly what happens with the upcoming draft. Well, speaking of hockey, you know that the Penguins had already won the Stanley Cup, and there's been some issue about exactly what's going to happen with their goaltender, Marc-Andre Fleury, a guy who's been beset by injuries and poor play in the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 years or so. Well, word has it maybe Fleury is going to restart his career as a member of the Las Vegas Golden Knights, which would be a good idea because Fleury, in my eyes, is still a good goalie, and he's still got youth on his side enough where he can make an impression with somebody. So let's see exactly what happens with them. For the record, the order of the NHL Draft has already taken place. It's going to be a 7-round draft, and the first round is going to be next Friday on the NBC Sports Network. And then the 2nd through 7th rounds are going to be next Saturday. That's the 23rd and the 24th. The first round is going to be on the NBC Sports Network, and the 2nd through 7th rounds are going to be on the NHL Network. And we mentioned that the Devils are going to be picking first. And there's been some talk about exactly who the Devils are going to pick. I've heard the names either Nolan Patrick or Nico Hischier, who've been playing mostly in the Ontario Hockey League. Hischier is a pretty strong guy, 6'2", 198 pounds, while Hischier is 6'1", and 178. Now, two teams that have a chance to really build for their future are the Flyers and the Red Wings. Do you know that the Flyers and the Red Wings each have 11 draft choices next week? And the Flyers are going to be picking second, and they have 4 picks out of the first 80 selections. The Red Wings, out of the 11 picks they have, 6 are within the first 3 rounds. So now both teams have a chance to really build something for down the road. For the record, the Islanders are going to be picking 15th, while the Rangers are going to pick 21st. So that's your story for the NHL Draft. And for as far as the top 10, it's going to be the Devils, Flyers, Stars, the Avalanche, the Canucks, the Golden Knights, the Coyotes, the Sabres, the Red Wings, and the Panthers, 1 through 10 in that order. As far as what else is going on in the world of sports, well, they just recently had, turning to wrestling, just recently they had Money in the Bank. Folks, let me tell you, I have to admit I have not watched a lot of wrestling in the last, I would say, maybe 10 years or so. Because ever since cable bought out SmackDown and Raw, I just have not been able to go by that much, except for the occasional pay-per-view that takes place. Between you and me, does sports entertainment still matter anymore? Because after WWE and TNA, and to a lesser extent, the Ring of Honor, what other promotions are there that can really grab the attention of the fans? I mean, there are some pretty decent promotions out there. Combat Zone is one. Of course, there's really good action coming out of Japan, which is All Japan and New Japan. Mexico is a little bit more along the lines of a clown atmosphere than anything else. But when you think about it, should we still even care about what's going on with WWE right now? They have dumbed down and made a mockery of so many characters and so many storylines that it's gotten to the point where enough is enough. I miss the days when we used to have real professional wrestling that had real storylines, real good character development, real good heat between fans and wrestlers, real good microphone time. When we had broadcasters interview the wrestlers as opposed to letting them speak on their own. Now, everything has become watered down and, worst of all, dumbed down. And quite frankly, I don't see any improvement out of this at all. Now, with about 4.5 minutes left, let me go into some stuff that's going on in other sports right now. They have finally decided to make a Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather match. All I can tell you is I hope that this becomes a very long and very hard-fought match, because I can't be seeing any of these first-round knockouts. It's going to make people want to riot in the stands if it goes that quickly. Some even say that this could be the sports story of the entire year. McGregor taking on Mayweather. I'll tell you right now, if I had to bet, all my money would go on Conor McGregor. The guy is absolutely no joke. Floyd Mayweather, I think, is probably more hype than anything else. So when you think about it, once that match takes place later this fall, you can bet your bottom dollar that Floyd Mayweather is going to do all he can to try and make this a really interesting bout. For the record, the bout is going to be held in Vegas, and my guess is it's going to be held at the T-Mobile Arena. So let's see exactly what happens there. Speaking of Las Vegas, we mentioned that the Golden Knights were going to be debuting their NHL season this coming September into October. Well, it's looking more and more like the Raiders are going to make their move to Vegas all the more concrete and set in stone, because they have all but locked a spot for them to have their new stadium, their new all-football-only stadium. So let's see exactly what happens there. As far as other happenings in the world of sports, from what I understand, the soccer star Cristiano Ronaldo has decided that he wants to call it a career with Real Madrid, and apparently there's been allegations of fraud levied by Ronaldo and thrust upon Real Madrid. So let's see exactly what happens there. Ronaldo has been such a polarizing figure in soccer, but he's also been such a tremendous player for Team Portugal and for Real Madrid. So let's see exactly what happens here. Going back to the NBA, I saw that I mentioned before that Chris Paul was looking at the Houston Rockets. Apparently, the Denver Nuggets are also showing some interest in him. Could it be that maybe they've given up on Emmanuel Mudiay? I mean, he's not necessarily been in the best of health in his 2 years with the Nuggets, so let's see exactly what happens. And are the Lakers going to draft Lonzo Ball after all, or are they going to shop that number 2 pick? Well, I guess only time is going to tell. So that's officially going to do it for us. Before we end it, let's say thanks to Kenny Graham, who's on the other side of the glass. And let's say thanks to you guys also for watching us at home. So for everyone here, I'm Jamie. Hopefully Eric will be joining us in the studio next week. So until then, we will see you next Monday night. Good night, everyone.